So Zonta really did come into play there. Michael tried to defend the line and then chose to go the long way around Zonta.
Well, it was incredible. it was incredible.
Welcome to the DRS Zone Podcast. Daily racing stories.
Holy mac and cheese balls.
From guests who probably know more than you or think they do.
No, Mikey, no, Mikey, that was so not right.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Listen to stories well known. Lesser known. And never told. With another episode of Daily Racing Stories today. Now, here's your host, RJ.
You're probably wondering what that was, and I'll be honest with you, that was a recording of our previous episode from one of the greatest overtakes in F1 history that, believe it or not, actually happened back at Spa almost 20 years ago to the day. Give that previous episode a listen and check it out. Without further ado, though, here's today's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to the DRS Zone podcast. RJ here once again to break down what was a absolute masterclass from Max Verstappen at the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Let's start off by saying Spa's contract just before the race started was renewed for another year. In my opinion, this is the FIA's way of kind of yanking the chain on the newer and more established Formula One fans. Personally, no bias aside here, I think Spa is one of the corners of Formula One's circuit. In my opinion, what happened with this race still being on the circuit with a one-year contract extension, granted it was not multiple, I believe Kalami was probably not added to the circuit, the South African race, and as a result, Spa maintained its place. Overall, I think the big solution here is pretty much a no-brainer. We should have a certain amount of tracks on the grid that should just stay. Silverstone obviously being one of them. People say Monaco is an issue and isn't an issue, so be it. There should be a certain amount of tracks that stay on the grid that are historic. They're good for F1. They've been there for the longest time. I would equate this in some ways of saying, it's like pulling just a historic stadium out of the NFL equivalent. The Dallas Cowboys, as much as people don't like the Dallas Cowboys because they're America's team in air quotes, you get rid of AT&T Stadium and the Dallas Cowboys in some way, it's like, the sports, you lose some identity to it. So Spa off the grid, not a good thing. We got the one-year contract extension, but I will not be surprised if we lose it. Anyways, not to be long-winded, let's get into the weekend. The starting grid, all over the place. Insert Valtteri Bottas meme where he kind of looks back at the back of, the green screen that's been memed. Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton kind of up on each other. From the back of the grid, we had the back grid boys. Mick Schumacher, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, Verstappen, Valtteri, all pretty much in the back here to start off the race. Valtteri's birthday did not go too well, let's be real. Crashed lap 1 by Latifi, who had one of the better qualifying sessions of the year in 11th. That was kind of sad to see. Let's actually go a little bit backwards more. The highlight of the Martin Brundle walk was probably him yelling, Esteban, 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 like a seagull looking for scraps out at a pier. If we go even further, Ferrari executed their plan to a T, as in Plan G. I don't know how many letters you need, but Plan G as in go home. How can you script anything more Ferrari that actually happened during this race? And Charles Leclerc being pitted close to the end of the race to get on softer, fresher tires to get fastest lap, ultimately to lose a spot to Ocon, to only gain it back with about a lap to go, to ultimately lose it because of speeding. The most Ferrari thing I've ever seen in the world. Let's also not forget to bring it back up to that first lap. Alonso having some choice words for Lewis. Lewis ultimately did admit fault for the incident and did not care about saying anything to Alonso that he had to say. Alonso saying, yeah, what an idiot, closing the door from the outside. I mean, we had a mega start, but this guy only knows how to drive and start in first. Well, hate to break it to you, two-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton has actually won more races, not in pole position. And from those, he has more race wins, not from pole position, than Alonso does all time. So, want to bring that to light. No harm, no foul on either of those drivers or fan bases. It blows my mind. Daily Racing Stories here. The Daily Racing Stories I did see is just this reoccurring theme of Lewis Hamilton fans going after Fernando Alonso after Lewis Hamilton admitted fault and justifying it in ways that I just don't get it. The driver who's responsible for it admits it, and you as a fan are still trying to say that the other driver was in the wrong when the driver who caused the issue admits it. That one is one I can't really wrap my head around, and I don't want to be polarizing to any groups. I try to be all-inclusive, but certain fan bases not shouting out Lewis Hamilton because we know there's other crazy fan bases out there, i.e. the Red Bull fan bases with some other issues going on, and I'm sure there's a multitude of other things from other fan bases we don't see, but it's polarizing to see some fan bases still wearing, in some ways, what I might call tinfoil hats. Again, no personal shots at anyone, just throwing it out there, just because I think it's worth saying, and don't want to be too long-winded here today. Let's be real. Battery Valdes said it best. Lewis Hamilton walking down a lonely road, insert Green Day lyrics, just pretty much saying, "Aw shit, here we go again," to quote him perfectly. Just walking down a service road with no cars to help him out after that crash. And ESPN F1, as an American fan, holy cringe. Not only 2 minutes later, they steal a popular tweet from essentially a memeable account and pretty much claim it as their own. If that's the way ESPN operates Formula One, I praise the Almighty that we are not getting Formula One broadcasted on ESPN more regularly. I really hope their coverage does expand. No shots at ESPN, but let's step it up here and at least give people credit where credit is due and not steal stuff, to say the least. On top of it, Barstool Paddock, gotta say, said it best. 12 laps. All it took was 12 laps for this guy, Max Verstappen, to take the lead starting P14 on the grid. Yep, couldn't have said it better. Masterclass Max Verstappen. Human, absolute cheat code nuts. The guy starts P14. His teammate starts P2, Checo Perez. He ends up beating him by over 17 seconds. Max Verstappen his Red Bull has absolutely given him wings, to quote the great Vincenzo Landino as well. The rest of this season, who knows where it will go, but unreal performance by Max Verstappen. It's comparable to Lewis Hamilton's drive in Brazil, what would have been last season, and you could make a lot of different comparisons regarding what was going on. Two different eras, considering the changes we've had in Formula One, but this is up there with one of the greatest all-time drives, in my opinion. And to watch it live, regardless of who you root for or don't root for, pretty priceless. I also want to give a shout-out to the Tech Heads F1 podcast by Dr. Obbs. Not that they endorse anything that I have to say, or Natural Paradigm, the two hosts, who, one of which actually, they're both, one has a PhD and one is in the process of getting a PhD. If you're looking for the technical side of F1, shameless plug, could not recommend their podcast more. Really fascinating, really cool to listen to. But Dr. Obbs said it best, technical directive 39 or not, Max and the RB18 are just on another level right now. Kudos to Red Bull Racing Team for doing such an amazing job and coming out of the summer break strong. And I think we all thought Mercedes was going to have a chance this weekend to get after it at Spa. The Lewis Hamilton streak, the longest of his career's winless streak, is extended by another race, and this was their chance as fans, Mercedes fans and fans in general. I think we thought this was the one chance maybe Red Bull doesn't win a race, also possibly with Ferrari, and that didn't happen this week. So a little bit disappointing, but in some ways it just proves how great the RB18 has been, and kudos and shout out and props to Max Verstappen. The other highlights from the race, we did have a double overtake, which is pretty awesome to see with an Alpine. On top of that as well, I will say the performance from Alex Albon was pretty impressive as well to get where he did with his Williams, especially in the third qualifying session. The Daniel Ricciardo show does go on. That should honestly have its own episode reoccurring for the pyramid scheme that Zach Brown, is running or maybe not running over at McLaren. Shout out to Rory for that reference there. Just with the amount of drivers that McLaren has opted to try to bring in or not bring into Formula One is still just mind-blowing. Was really hoping for some DR3 points just to kind of still rub some salt on the wound that is his relationship with Zach Brown, but that'll pend coming up in weeks in the future. I will say as well, do have a separate episode coming out shortly after this one, just regarding where Max Verstappen stands in terms of possibly having one of the greatest seasons of all time in Formula One. So catch that and look forward to it coming out sooner or later after this episode. That's all I got for you here today. Hopefully it wasn't too long-winded, but I will be honest, recording and editing podcasts is harder than you think. I'm not trying to go on a tangent here, but keeping it short, sweet, and concise is just the way I like it. So we're going to keep it at that. Hope everyone had a great weekend watching and has a great week coming up as well. We'll be back here soon on the DRS Zone podcast. Any stories we're sharing, please be sure to send me a DM, tweet, whatever, and we will include them on the show. The two stories I do want to get to very briefly, one of which is on this day, he would be celebrating his 75th birthday, the great James Hunt. If you do not know who he is, please watch the movie Rush. I will say no more. On top of it as well, want to give a shout out for one of the cooler fan stories I did see on social media this weekend involving a Carly. Now, Carly here had the opportunity to meet Sebastian Vettel. Said that he met him, he was so sweet and kind. He said thank you for everything over the years. And Seb responded and said, and I quote, No, thank you. Thank you for your love, support, and passion. And then he proceeded to give her a hug. So, pretty cool story from the circuit grid there. And I got to give a shout out to my man Seb for his performance during this race as well. Pretty much putting an Aston Martin where it deserves not to be. And if that's his way of getting back at the Strolls for his retirement or however that unfolded, so be it. But shout out to Sebastian Vettel. Also shout out to Carly for letting me share that story as well. Take care, guys and girls. We will talk sooner or later.